Welcome to the Worth Listening podcast, where we focus on having positive and productive conversations around money. I'm your host, Lauren, a 4-time Olympian and certified financial planner. On this show, my guests share their money stories. Everyone has a unique story and experiences both wins and losses when it comes to money. My intent is to give listeners something they can relate to, something that builds their courage to be open and take control of their own money story. When I'm not creating a great show for my listeners, I'm running my company, Worth Winning, where I help individuals and families organize their finances. Check us out at worth-winning.com. All right, now on with the show. Welcome to another episode of the Worth Listening podcast, and not just another episode, but part 2 of the Know Better, Do Better series within the travel series. So if you're new to this podcast, there might sound like that was a lot going on, but you're listening to the Worth Listening podcast, and we are in the middle of a travel series. And I have one of my financial planning besties who does this Know Better, Do Better part of the series with me, and her name is Chloe Moore. Chloe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So at the top of every show, we always do trends, taxes, and tea, where we're either bringing you something about what's going on in the latest trends, trying to save you a little money on taxes, or just giving you some good old fashioned tea. And sometimes it's a combination of all of those things, but we're trying to make sure that you can save more, pay less, that you're up on your current events, and that we can get you started with a little money topic. So Chloe, what is the trends, taxes, and tea for today?
Yeah, so I came across this Newsweek article about the average cost of vacations. So according to the most recent data from a website called budgetyourtrip.com, a vacation in the United States costs an average of $285 per person per day. So that includes, the hotel, transportation, food, activities, all those things. So really based on that number, the average vacation for 1 week of traveling within the U.S. is approximately $2,000 per person.
Wow. Hold up. Wait a minute. So, your girl is a travel enthusiast. I would have never guessed. Like you said, I think what we don't do a good job of is quantifying or breaking down costs. $285 per day. It sounds like a lot of money to me. And then you're like $2,000 per person. Like if you're a family of 4, like it's easy to spend $8,000 on a week-long trip is what you're basically telling me. That's like a normal average thing that happens. And obviously, if we're saying average, there's people that spend a lot more than that. And then, there's people that slide under the radar, but whew.
Yeah, that's a lot, especially for a U.S. trip. I think back in the day, we'd think about spending $2,000 and like being able to go out of the country. So like that much, but when you think about it, there are a lot of plane tickets these days. Easily just to fly within the U.S. could cost $500-$600 depending on where you're going.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we just did an episode recently on travel hacking as well, or credit card hacking specifically. And I think that helps some people negate the cost of some of the travel fees. I know you recently came to visit me in Medellin, Colombia. Do you know plus or minus on average what that trip cost you?
Yeah, I use points for the flight. But yeah, everything else combined was probably about $2,000 max.
Okay, so we're right up on the average, and yet it didn't include your flight. And we were at I think a 5-day trip.
Yeah,
and we stayed at top of the line accommodations.
Yes,
so we could have saved a little bit more. You could have come in under average, because I consider it's a pretty cheap country. But I feel like the other thing that happens sometimes is that people get abroad and they're like, oh, it was a really cheap trip or a really cheap flight, and then they spend a little bit extra because they save money on this so they can spend a little bit more over here. That kind of thing happens as well.
Yeah, a big portion of that was our Airbnb, which was on the expensive side.
Yeah. All right. And so what else does the article talk about besides just like the average cost or what's going on?
So basically, in addition to like this just total number that it costs for 1 week of traveling, the article also breaks down like average transportation costs, like lodging costs, food and drink expenses, entertainment and activities. It shows like when you're traveling both in the U.S. and internationally. So we'll put a link in the show notes. It's really interesting to see what the breakdown is for the average of all these different types of costs, and it can help you plan for your trip.
And if you haven't quite figured it out yet, today's topic is budgeting for travel. I like to call budgeting the big bad B word. And so when we think about it, it's like nobody wants to make a budget for anything, much less for travel. But I know that most of my clients are super excited about travel. They're always trying to figure out how to get their next trip in. I myself, like I said, consider myself a travel enthusiast. I have fled the country, moved to Medellin, Colombia, reworked my whole business even to start providing financial retreats in Colombia. And so budgeting and travel, like to me, the two words are just like perfectly matched for one another. But not for everybody. So I think we should spend a little bit of time today talking about some best practices as it relates to budgeting for travel. So why don't we just start with something like simple? Why is it important to budget for travel from your point of view, Chloe?
Yeah, so when it comes to travel, I think it's one of the major items like that I see on a client's budget next to, dining out and just kind of miscellaneous mindless shopping. But it really can take a toll on your budget. If you're not planning in advance for trips, if you're not saving to go on big trips, or if you're not thinking about like the cost of last minute trips, a lot of times you can get into credit card debt, or you can, really just blow your entire budget. So that's one of the things that, I try to work with clients on, is making sure that we plan ahead for those things if it's something that's important to them.
Yeah, I think one of the like kind of fears that people have around working with a financial professional is, like I said, the budgeting piece of it. They're like, they're going to put me in jail. I'm not going to be able to spend anything. I'm just going to feel imprisoned by whatever plan this financial planner is going to come up with me because I know I've been living my best life. And it's like, that you have other goals, other things that you want to accomplish financially, which is why you're thinking about reaching out to a financial planner. And I want to be the one to tell you that we do not put you in prison. Like, we help you use money as a tool to live the life that you want, and creating a budget so that you can continue to travel, but also reach your other goals is a big piece of this puzzle. So don't think that because you get on Chloe's calendar that you're not going to be able to go anywhere anymore. Like, we're going to help you as a financial professional figure out how to fit this thing into your life, along with the other things like, generally retirement, saving, investing, those sorts of things as well. You can still travel, have a good time. We just want to make sure that you're using best practices, that you said you're planning in advance and doing what you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've helped clients plan, sabbaticals for up to 3 months, and they took off work and traveled the world. I had one client go to 3 different countries in 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's if you want it to happen, we can figure out ways to make it happen, but we just have to be able to prioritize that and maybe cut out some of the other things that aren't as important.
Yeah. So to that point, I think you probably, like you said, the client had to come to you at some point and say, hey, I want to take a sabbatical. So they gave you some advance notice, but you also needed some time to plan in advance. So what should we be thinking about as we think about being ahead of the ball? Because we know there's the last minute trips, but when we can, we want to be ahead and thinking and planning in advance.
Yes. One of the things is just thinking about, in general, how much you'd like to travel each year, and how much of a priority is it to you. So I know some people might say, oh, I want to go on one international trip each year, maybe one domestic trip where I fly, like one road trip, or just, some combination of those things. But really think about like your travel style, like what places you want to visit, what do you want to do, and really just kind of start to build your budget around that.
Yeah, I know for me, like with my clients, I always challenge them to really think about what the word means to them, because so many people want to go on more trips. They're like, I'm not traveling enough. I want to travel more. I want to see the world. It's a very broad, open-ended thing. But part of making a plan is like understanding what's important to you. So to your point about like one international trip, one domestic, one road trip, that's 3 different types of travel right there. Like you could take a flight really far. You could take a flight really nearby. You could jump in your car and go somewhere. But it also matters, like, where does your family live? Like as an example, I have 5 sisters and 2 brothers, and none of us live in the same city or state. So we're spread out all over the country. There's travel just built into keeping my regular baseline relationships in place. You might be a person who's terrified of flying. You might be a person where all your family lives within a 3-hour radius. So the road trips, you can accomplish a lot more by doing 4 or 5 road trips a year. But the first thing to do is like understand, where do I want to go? Why do I want to go to those places? And how can I build something around it? Because if, like I said, family is number one in your life, okay, maybe your family lives internationally. Like my sister's coming to visit me in Medellin, Colombia soon. So, she's planning for international travel in advance. Or maybe it's, like I said, everybody lives nearby and you want to see them every weekend and, you just need a tank of gas. It's still travel and it's still something that's extracurricular. So you want to be thinking about that.
Yeah, and even, I mean, with me, and I know some people have a hard time, with this, but I mean, I think about travel a year in advance, and I break it out between personal and work travel or conferences that I attend for work. So usually towards the end of the year, I'll start thinking about, okay, for next year, how many personal trips do I want to take? And then how many conferences am I attending, or what kind of travel do I need to do for work? And just start to kind of map it out, even if I'm not specific on dates, thinking about the types of trips and what months out of the year, makes sense for me to travel. And if you're a business owner like we are, that means you have to plan in advance for those things, because otherwise you'll just work, and look up and it's a year and you haven't been anywhere.
100%. And I will say that, the thing that I love about Chloe, like why we're besties is like the opposites attract. So she's the plan in a year. I can definitely attest to the fact that she's like, I have everything planned out. When is your birthday again? How much is it going to cost? When are you going to have the finalized information available? Like she is planning in advance, and I am the exact opposite. You are listening to two financial planners, both who, finances are near and dear to our heart. Planning is near and dear to our heart, but we have two separate methods about going about it. And I will say that the further in advance that you can be, the better your life is and the better your budget will be. Don't be the last minute person all the time, even though I'm probably like 80% of the time making it up as I go because last minute is just like, I'm more of a seat of the pants, fly by whim, but you still can do something to plan in advance, which we'll talk about, like an annual budget momentarily, like having some money set aside so that you can fly by the seat of your pants, because there's money for that versus having every single trip planned. There's different ways to go about it is my point. But the other thing I want to say is like, don't forget about those last minute trips that come up. So one that happened for me as an example is my sister that I was just talking about. She got pregnant, which, it's her right. She can do it whenever she wants to. But it would have been nice if she would have told me, hey, I'm going to be getting pregnant. It's going to take about 9 months for that thing to happen. There's going to be some baby showers in the process. And because we live all over the country, she ended up having 3 baby showers and a gender reveal. This is my like bestie, my baby sister. I'm not going to miss anything. So what happened to my budget? 4 events that I had to travel for that were pretty much last minute trips, because earlier in the year when she was not pregnant, I didn't have 3 baby showers and a gender reveal on my calendar. But there's going to be other things for you because life is always lifing. So bachelor or bachelorette parties, weddings, anniversary, birthdays, somebody like we're in the age group where all of our friends have turned 40 recently. I actually have a few friends that turned 50 recently. So those big milestone birthdays that you don't want to miss. Plan as much as you can, knowing that those things are coming up, and also probably knowing that your friends are not the most organized and they're like, I don't really want to know what I want to do for my 50th. Then all of a sudden they're going to Bali for their 50th. And you're like, what? Can't plan for Bali in 2 weeks,
Yeah, and also, I mean, just know who your friends are. Like some of your friends will spring a last minute trip on you. Make sure you have, money set aside for some of those things that might come up, or that you have flexibility in your schedule. And that's something as rigid as I am, I do, allow for flexibility for those things so that I don't miss great opportunities to spend time with people I care about. And then also know who your friends are from a budgeting perspective. If you're the budgeting person and your friends are not budgeting people, just kind of keep that in mind. Like if, one of the things that Lauryn did for her 40th birthday, she told us a year in advance. She's like, we're going on a trip for my birthday and y'all have 12 months to save up this money to figure this out. But, you can't always spring it on some of your friends because, they might not be in the same financial position, or, you don't want to mess up their finances or their budget for the year. So really think about that.
Yeah, my theme or my tagline is friends don't let friends have effed up finances. So to your point, it was like, hey, I'm turning 40. I know I'm doing something. I'm not sure what it is, but get your pocketbook ready because I want to go big. And to that point, when people weren't able to come and they started to call, I didn't shame them. I didn't make them feel sad that they couldn't come to my birthday. Like, I want to see people win with their money. I want them to make sure that they're, stay home because they got to put money in the 529 plan, or they're a little bit behind on making sure that they want to get ahead on their mortgage, or whatever the case may be. People have stuff going on in their life. And the thing I want more for the people that I care about than anything is that they're able to use money as a tool to live the life that they want. And it doesn't always include doing something financially irresponsible just to be able to like make me happy for a couple of days. I'd much rather them be long-term happy. And like I said, that kid be able to go to college, that mortgage be paid, that they don't have to move in with me because they decided to go on a trip with me. Yeah.
But yeah, don't be afraid to say no, and don't shame your friends for saying no.
Exactly. Which I brought up a little bit earlier about the idea if you're more of a fly by the seat of the pants person, that doesn't mean you don't plan in advance in some sort, form, or fashion. So the way that I do my budget is I do have an annual travel budget. And so there's just like an amount that's sitting there and it kind of dwindles so that I can kind of pick up and go. And, if I ball till I fall at the beginning of the year, then I might have to sit down somewhere at the end of the year. So, Chloe, what do you think are some of the tips as you think about an annual travel budget?
Yeah. So once kind of have an idea of how much you'd like to travel, how much of a buffer you need to build in for last minute trips, you need to set that annual budget. So you can look at some of your past trips and get an idea of what the cost was for different types, if it was an international trip or if it was a road trip or a domestic trip. And just think about the average cost of those and really all in costs. Don't just think about flight and hotel, because that's where people get messed up.
Mm-hmm.
They forget about all the food, the nice dinners, the parties, the activities, excursions. So all of those things, like really consider how much those things are going to cost. And then, like I said, include that buffer for those last minute trips, and then set that budget aside for the year. If it's, $6,000 a year that you need to go on your trips, then you could save $500 a month. Or if you get a bonus, go ahead and put $6,000 away so that you have that money set aside for the year and continue to replenish it, because you're going to continue to pull from it.
Yeah, I mean, to Chloe's point, she just threw out a number, $6,000 a year. Somebody probably got a little sticker shock like, woo, $6,000. But if you refer back to the top, it's about $2,000 on average for each person. So if you take 3 trips a year, you are probably spending $6,000. And this leads back to that idea of like not actually having a budget, not tracking your finances, not being realistic about what's actually being spent. And so many of us do it. So you are not alone if you are in that boat. It's hard to stay completely aware of your finances unless you have a way of tracking your finances. So, I keep calling it the big bad B word because so many think budgeting is bad, but really understanding your spending and above and beyond even travel, like whatever your other expenses are, if you're not tracking that in any meaningful way, that's why you always feel like you're, on your toes or, running around on hot coals as it relates to your finances in a very reactive mode. You can't fathom $6,000 as a travel budget, but maybe you're spending more than that actually, because you don't actually know what it looks like to spend. So you need a budget. Yes, I'm telling you need a budget, but that's actually the name of an app that I like to use that you can check out. We have lots of podcasts on budgeting as well. So you can go back to and figure out what works for you. But there's another one that's becoming really popular. It's called Monarch. And that's helping people get organized. And you can see kind of all of your finances in one place. So just throwing out 2 quick tools for you to kind of think about this in a bigger picture if you're ready to start budgeting overall. And so this might be a good timing. So can never say enough about budgeting in general.
Yeah. And one of the things that a question that clients always have for me is, okay, we've set aside the cash, but logistically, how does this work? So I typically tell people, we talk a lot about high yield savings accounts. You can probably go back to several episodes and hear us talk about that, but you can set up buckets in your savings account. So you can have your emergency fund, you can have your travel fund, you can have your home down payment fund, all these different funds for different purposes. And so when you go on a trip, basically you just reimburse yourself for the travel expenses from that savings account. So, once you get back, or if you're able to prepay a lot of things, you can always just reimburse yourself from that account.
And people forget that all the time. Chloe said it's an easier thing to think through. Like initially you're like, okay, I got the money saved. And then it's like, well, what do I do with the money I have saved? And it sits over in the savings, and then you run it up on your credit card, and then you're like, oh gosh, things are out of balance. Where am I going to get this money from? And you're trying to like figure it out afterward. What you should be doing is, like you said, moving the money or reimburse yourself immediately. And I know the other thing too is like people are using points and credit cards and things like that. So now you charge a $600 flight to your credit card. You can pay your credit card immediately. So now you got your points and you paid the $600 from your travel account and got that out of the way. So that's not hitting your credit card statement a month and a half later, because we all know credit cards kind of run in arrears. And so you're just like, I can't keep up with what happened because this money is hitting after I have already been on vacation, come home, and other things have gone on. It's better to reimburse yourself immediately for those things that you've saved up for.
Yeah, and another thing that I wanted to bring up too, just even thinking about paying for trips, there are studies that have found that paying for a trip in advance can help you really get more happiness out of every dollar that you spend. And so one of my favorite books that's a really easy read is Happy Money by Elizabeth Dunn. And so we'll put a link in the show notes. But it's a lot less stressful when you do this planning ahead and if you can prepay for trips. Like I have a trip out of the country in November and I've already paid for everything. I just have to show up. And so that's going to make the trip a lot more enjoyable for me, and I just have to cover little incidentals here and there. But the bulk of my trip is paid for. So that can really make it, a lot less stressful while you're on your trip.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, too. And I mean, don't underestimate the power of payment plans. So, we get on these tips where we do something last minute, we charge it all to our credit card, which is not a payment plan. So you feel like you're paid in full. You don't owe anybody, but you still owe the credit card company. And like I said, that kind of hangs out and sits around and lingers for a bit. Whereas you could, for my financial retreats, as an example, I'm doing 3. You can pay in October, pay in November, pay in December, and be ready for January sort of thing. But you can start saving up the money in advance, make a payment each month and then be paid in full by the time the trip rolls around. That way you don't have to worry about the quote unquote layaway. You did kind of lay it away, if you will, and you don't have to worry about paying for it after it's all said and done.
Yeah. And then actually another thing I want to talk about was just planning for the trip. So, just kind of how to get the biggest bang for your buck there. So one of the things that we'd like to do is just look at the big ticket items first. The airfare and the hotel or accommodations is typically the 2 big ticket items when you're looking at your trip. So there's some ways that you can save there. Consider the time of year that you're traveling and the location. There's some places that have busy seasons that, have seasons that aren't so busy. And the cost, for airfare, hotel might be a little bit more expensive. If you're traveling around the holidays, it could be more expensive. So really, if you're looking to get the biggest bang for your buck and really enjoy what could be an expensive trip, consider some of those off seasons to travel.
100%. The off season. The good thing about Medellin, Colombia is that there is no off season in the sense that the weather is always the same. I think the off season comes with what's happening in the rest of the world. People are back in school or people are doing this or that. But depending on where you want to go, there should be some sort of time frame where there's a lag related to, not that many people are coming at this time of the year. And so therefore it's a little bit cheaper so that we can, entice people to come a little bit more. So be mindful that if you can be patient, you can probably save money versus going right at the peak in the midst of everything.
Yeah. And then also, just even to Lauren's credit, like sometimes if you do those last minute trips or fly by the seat of your pants, you can find last minute deals, but you have to have flexibility in your schedule to be able to do that.
100%. They say, I don't know if it's true or not, that like booking your flights on a Tuesday or in the middle of the night also makes your flight a little bit cheaper. I haven't really figured out the algorithm for what happens, but I do know that there's something that goes on because I had a friend that was buying the exact same flight as me. And it was $200 more. And I was just like, why? Like, maybe I got the last, cheap seat and then moved on to, whatever the next price was. But after I purchased my ticket, I went back on the website to purchase the ticket again. And I ended up buying her ticket for her because for whatever reason, her computer and her phone were showing her $200 more for the exact same flight than the flight that I was seeing. So we ended up flying together and, I saved her $200 because if she had just booked it, she would have just assumed it like, oh, hey, so don't be afraid to ask around a little bit, too, because like I said, I don't know what the computers do, but there's something to it. So,
yeah, one of the things that I do, too, is, I am one of those planners. So I do like to buy all my tickets up front and far in advance. As soon as I know I'm going on a trip, I just go ahead and book everything. But with hotels, a lot of times you can cancel up to 24 hours or up to 72 hours in advance. So, I mean, if you know you're going to a conference and they have a room block and you want to go ahead and get your seat in there, like go ahead and book it because you can always cancel if you decide not to go. And same thing with the airfare. Like you can book a flight in advance. If the price goes down, you can always get a credit back and use that on the next flight. So, or you can even get your points back. Like if you do a redemption for points and the price goes down, you can get some of those points credited back to your account. So don't be afraid to just, pay for things when you can, and then go back and check those prices and see if things have changed, or, or you can cancel if you need to.
Oh, you actually bring up a really good point too about the idea that you need to think about cancellation things that could happen and mess up your trip planning budget. So one, if you need to cancel everything at the last minute and you don't have any kind of insurance, and like you're going to start fumbling and looking for the cancellation policies and hoping that you can get some of the money back. That's where trip insurance comes into play. But that's also where, like you said, the planning in advance comes. What is going to happen if everybody doesn't put in their part, or if XYZ happens, if there's a hurricane and we can't travel? Understanding like what those additional fees are and how you could be set back even further, because those are unplanned expenses that you can't really plan for, but you can set aside a little bit of extra money. I had a friend that got to Jamaica and got COVID like during the height of everything and had to stay an extra week at his own expense. Those kind of things can really set you back if you don't have a plan in place, which I will say too, when I was younger, it was like, oh, I'm not paying $5 extra for trip insurance. I'm not paying XYZ. And now my risk tolerance has gone down quite a bit. And I started purchasing actually my own travel insurance separate of like, the flight or whatever, so that I have something in place should something happen. I want to make sure that I can get back to America and get seen by a proper doctor that speaks English or whatever the case may be. So make sure you evaluate, one, your risk tolerance related to the various types of catastrophes that we can't see. And then two, that you understand what the cancellation policies are, because that's another thing that could cost you a bunch of extra money related to trip planning.
Yeah, and we talked about credit cards last time, but yeah, another thing is a lot of these travel cards have great trip insurance, cancellation insurance. So look at your credit cards. Like these cards that have these really high fees, they have a lot of great things that can help you out there. So understand the policies for where you're booking, like those specific companies themselves, but also like what your credit card can provide you.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. All right. So as we wrap it up, I feel like we covered a bunch of information probably pretty quickly, but it's a lot of good information. Let's just like give them a few bullet points. If you're like, hey, just tell me what I really need to be thinking about, guys. You said a lot. Give me the summary of what are the important pieces of the puzzle when we think about travel budgeting.
Yeah. So the big thing is, really think about your travel in advance. I'd say even up to 6 to 12 months in advance. Consider any upcoming events or things that might be last minute that could pop up. Keep a travel fund that covers your trips that you plan. Keep the buffer in there. Look for deals, shop around, and consider your credit card points.
Yeah, I just booked a flight on points and I was so excited about it because so infrequently do I find something when I'm leaving the country for, 12,500 points is kind of like the baseline with American Airlines, who I travel with the most. So it's like, that's the cheap flight. And I was like, I could actually leave the country for 12,500. This is awesome. So don't forget about your points. I was like, almost booked the flight. And I was like, wait, no, don't pay for this. You got points. So, all right. For today's money quote, I am going to give credit in advance because Chloe and I spent a good bit of time thinking about how to pronounce this person's name, and we couldn't come up with a good answer. So A. Shukla, shout out to you. If you ever listen to our podcast, this is a great quote. We're going to put the full name in the show notes in the event that someone wants to look up this great quote. But the quote for today is, fill your life with experiences, not things. Have stories to tell, not stuff to show. Chloe, tell me why you like this quote.
Yeah, I love this quote. It just goes back to things that make you happy. And a lot of times when we look back on, the things that make us the happiest in life, it really is the experiences and the memories that we share with people that we care about. And it's not, all these things that we surround ourselves with. So I'd really, like to live that myself and just focus on the experiences that I create, the memories that I can create with people, and focus a little bit less on, the material things.
Yeah, 100%, because the material things kind of break down. You throw them in the trash. You can't take them with you. I'm in the midst of moving and selling my house in America. And I'm like, oh gosh, my furniture. And I'm like, but this desk, this table. And I'm like, I don't really need to bring that table. Like, I just need something to eat off here in Colombia. So, you think that the material things matter until they become really inconvenient for you to be able to move them around. But the experiences that I have, like you said, will last a lifetime. The memories that I built. I remember going swimming in Mexico with Chloe, sort of things, and being on my cruise and seeing a glacier for the first time. Like those things are not going away easily. They're intangibles versus these tangibles that are going to fall apart and then they're not going to be a part of your life anymore. So I really love this quote.
Yeah.
All right. That is all we have for you all today. This is the end of part 2 of our Know Better, Do Better series in the travel section. We will be coming back to you with more Know Better, Do Better in our next season. If you have questions, suggestions, topics that you'd like for Chloe and I to discuss, if you want us to come back a little bit more, we might do a little pop-up episode on you. Do let us know. We are here to hear whatever it is that you all want to hear, because all we're trying to do is spread the news of financial planning and make people feel more excited about it. So you can reach me at podcast@worth-listening.com. Podcast@worth-listening.com. Until next time, people.
Bye.